What's going on YouTube? Welcome to the channel. This is LoneWolf, and in this video we're going to look at the covenants as a whole coming in Shadowlands. We're going to talk about which covenants is best for marksmanship and which is worse, the different kind of synergies that each covenant soulbind brings to the spec, and end it with a final thoughts. So with that being said, let's get into it. Welcome everyone. So for the last few days, I spent it researching every covenant, researching and reading each ability, and customizing the loadouts for both PvP and PvE, and through that, I learned a few things. With no access to the beta, I had to do the best with what I have, and with many years and countless experiences playing World of Warcraft, I can understand the language of these abilities and how they will impact us. The most surprising thing about making this video was ever since the announcement of the covenants, I had a strong pull to the Kyrians because of their abilities, how these abilities will benefit the spec, their transmogs, and their mount. And now after diving deep into all the covenants, it has actually become a tough choice. I never expected myself to like another covenant, but it goes to show that they all have their strengths and weaknesses depending on what you're doing in the game. Before we get into it, let's talk about the meat of the covenants, which are the soulbinds. I want to mention that there are soulbinds that as a whole are worth more than some covenant abilities. Also, when you unlock these soulbinds, you won't have access to all the soulbinds and their abilities until you meet certain criteria, which means that every week there will be a new meta as people start unlocking new tiers. Pre-plan your setup and act accordingly to stay on top of your game until we get access to it all. There are filler abilities and soulbinds that bring no actual combat benefit, so I'll skip those and let you decide on those. Also, this is all due to change if there is tuning done within these covenants. On the same side of the spectrum, we also have to look at our conduits. There are three types of conduits: finesse, endurance, and potency. Covenant potency. Some conduits are tied to soulbind abilities and vice versa, so you have to take into account if the ability is worth picking over a particular type of conduit. So let's start off with what I consider to be the end-all be-all covenant for myself. I was going to represent the shit out of this covenant and make sure that I know it like the back of my hand. The Kyrian. Kyrian covenant abilities: Raising Netting Arrow, an ability that buffs your crit by 30% and allows you to ignore line of sight to the targeted location, and the signature ability, Summon Steward, that gives you access to a number of options, with the most important being providing you with 3 charges of File of Serenity. So now we're going to look at the Kyrian soulbinds. So just so we're on the same page, I'm going to say a brief summary of each soulbind on how it impacts us. I'm going to mention the noteworthy abilities, both good and bad, and finish it with an overview. Feel free to pause the video to read the description of what interests you. So for the Kyrian soulbinds, first we have Pelagos. Pelagos is a very lackluster soulbind overall with a decent final ability. The first ability is lackluster as marksmanship often casts Steady Shot, Arcane Shot, and Aim Shot 2 times in a row, so you won't gain the full benefit as often as you like. One of the stronger soulbind abilities is tied to a finesse conduit, with the last ability giving you a 5% mastery proc that can be extended. The second soulbind for Kyrian is Clea. Clea is focused on debuff removal and self-sustainability. The stronger of her first tier soulbind abilities is tied to a finesse conduit. Her second strongest conduit is tied to a potency conduit, which is a plus, and down the line you could pick up a 10% health shield when out of combat for 5 seconds. Her last ability, when procced, heals you for 10% of your health and your closest allies for 5%. Great conduit to play with a Resto or Fear Druid, or for self-sustainability in the long run in PvE or solo content. So for the third Kyrian Soulbind, we have Forgelight Prime Mechanicos, who is best for survivability with an auto heal and stun protection. In my opinion, the best Soulbind out of the three, as it provides utility where Marksmanship needs it most, when stunned. The stronger of the first abilities is tied to a potency, which is a plus. The second tier has an even stronger ability which stuns nearby enemies when you fall below 35% health, so you will heal and stun targets on you. Huge plus for MM. However, it is tied to a finesse conduit, but may be worth the trade-off. The ability tied to the potency conduit forces you to stand still for 5 seconds to get a 20% stun reduction, and while this is strong, Marksmanship is not a spec that may benefit from standing still that long for every go. The third ability in this tier will be great in anything that you have to attack multiple targets, as 10% is a nice boost to both damage and playstyle. Mechanicos' last ability isn't too attractive, but a random extra knockback and extra damage may prove useful. Great Soulbind for clutch survivability in both PvP and PvE solo content. Overview for the content abilities. With the class ability Resonating Arrow being attractive in both PvE and PvP for Marksmanship, and the signature providing Marksmanship with a utility that the spec has been needing for a long time, this Covenant choice will be immensely useful in many aspects of the game. The Kyrian Soulbinds as a whole do not bring much damage or playstyle synergy with Marksman, but the debuff removal from Clea and her passives to keep you alive are a big bonus. Pelagos not having anything interesting but only a decent final ability for throughput, and Mechanicos taking the crown here for being able to help MM where it matters most in PvP, while stunned. For the next Covenant, we take a look at the Necrolord. The Necrolord Covenant ability for your class is Dead Chakram, which is a damaging ability that continues to increase in damage every time it hits and gives you focus every time it hits. And the signature ability being Fleshcraft, which is an absorb channeled ability. So for the Soulbinds, the first one is Plague Dr. Marilith. Plague Dr. Marilith has awkward ability placements, with the first potency conduit tied to a defensive, and the better of the 3-tier abilities being tied to a finesse conduit. Nothing interesting until the very last Soulbind ability, which makes you immune to CC while casting Fleshcraft, and for 4 seconds after finishing the cast. This ability, while strong, is the last ability in this Soulbind and is tied to a lackluster tree for Marksmanship. The second Soulbind, which is Emily, her last ability is melee ranged, and the rest of the tree is very lackluster except being able to cast Fleshcraft while moving. And the last Soulbind for the Necrolord is Bonesmith Hyrmer, or Hermir. Now this Soulbind seems to be a tanking Soulbind with only 2 interesting choices that are in the same tier, but only one has access to a potency conduit. The last ability instantly revives you and allows you to play for 10 seconds at 50% reduced damage and healing and cannot be healed. This is a no bueno ability for Marksmanship Hunters. Overview for the Covenant ability. Death Chakram itself is pretty good for Marksmanship and synergizes with our playstyle because while it deals damage, it provides us with focus. Being that we are very focus starved, this ability really shines. With Fleshcraft, Death having its uses with lots of energy between it and the Soulbinds, but the Soulbinds themselves don't provide any synergy or much throughput for Marksmanship as other Covenant Soulbinds. Necrolord Soulbinds are tailored to make classes more tankier and have underwhelming final abilities for Marksmanship. The highlight would be Fleshcraft making you immune to CC. Alright, so let's go to the next Covenant, which is the Night Fae. The Night Fae Covenant abilities are Wild Spirits, and the signature ability is Soul Shape. Alright, so let's look at the Night Fae's Covenant Soulbinds. The first Soulbind is Nia. With Nia, you can heal while in Soul Shape. You have access to an easy 3 potency conduits as the Soulbinds tied to them are strong. Her last ability, while having a long ramp up time for its full potential, allows Wild Spirits to also heal you for up to 10% health and give you up to 20% mastery for 30 seconds. Very, very juicy. Great for both PvE and PvP. The second Soulbind is Dreamweaver. Her first ability gives you 10% haste after using Wild Spirits and standing in her flowers, which helps in openers. You get access to 3 potency conduits for PvP and a short ultra slow off of your traps, disorients, and root. It also has cheat death mechanic as a last ability on a 30-minute cooldown. Great for both PvE and PvP. Now the third Soulbind for the Night Fae is Kyrian. Her Soulbound tree gives you access to 3 easy potency conduits as the abilities tied to them are strong, and the last ability synergizes very well with careful aim for huge bursty openers. Great for both PvP and PvE. Overview for Covenant abilities. Wild Spirits being somewhat interesting with its potency conduit, strong class ability Soulbind perks, beautiful to look at, great damage potential if it works how it should with a very big area effect, and the signature ability Soul Shape being pretty decent for us, especially when tied with the heal, makes this an intriguing choice. The damage increase tied with Wild Spirits conduit and the extra damage from the owls may make this the strongest Covenant ability in the game for throughput at the price of less utility. The 3 Night Fae Soulbinds overall synergizes very well with Marksmanship Hunters, as it has strong damage increasing effects, healing on the move, throughput procs, and a cheat death, which makes the Night Fae the most attractive Covenant when speaking about Covenant Soulbinds as a whole. Alright, so for the very last Covenant, we're going to look at the Venthyr. The Venthyr Covenant ability for your class is Flayshot, and the signature ability is Door of Shadows. So for the first Soulbind for the Venthyr, Nagia the Mistblade. She's a great PvE Soulbind with interesting tier 5 choices that may be worth using over the potency tied conduit ability. For PvP, it makes your Door of Shadows disorient targets, which is a huge plus when used right. The last ability, while insanely useful, may not always be efficient to take advantage of in PvP, but still it provides a lot of bonus haste, and this is great for PvE and PvP. Theodore the Mad Duke, who is the second soulbind for the Venthyr. This soulbind has awkward placements for conduits, and the soulbind abilities are lackluster for Marksmanship hunters, but the last ability grants you 10% versatility every time you use Flecha, which is every 30 seconds. Or you can go for 2 charges of Door Shadows at the cost of a potency conduit. This conduit is great for maxing out versatility. General Draven, the third and final soulbind we're going to look at in this video. Just like Theotar, this soulbind has awkward potency conduit placements and mostly lackluster abilities. The strongest soulbind ability gives you a 10% crit after interrupting an enemy, but is tied to an endurance conduit. His last ability gives you 10% damage reduction while below 40% health. Lots of damage prevention, good for solo content or situations where you need damage mitigation. Overview: Flecha is an okay ability. In PvE, it makes your rotation awkward, and in PvP, you may go through an entire Flecha without a single proc of killshot, or end up with many procs of it. The damage from Flecha and its mechanics may be worth it though. Door Shadows may be the more useful Venthyr ability, especially when tied to the Disorient Soulbind ability. Overall, this is an okay covenant for soulbinds, with Nagia bringing in what we like with all that haste, and giving Door Shadows the ability to CC your target. The other 2 soulbinds, however, are not impressive, so this might leave you stuck with one soulbind as Marksmanship hunters for the Venthyr. Alright, so now that we got the covenants out the way, we're now here at my personal thoughts on these covenants. After taking a deep look into the whole package, there are deft uses for all of them, but 2 covenants stand out the most to me. The first is Kyrian, as both covenant abilities are very valuable and can carry the shortcomings of its soulbinds. Paired with Mechanicals, when everything unlocked, it may make Marksmanship a very tough foe to escape from and much harder to kill. Paired with Clea, you might find yourself living much longer if anything else, which may prove useful with much more self-heals and debuff immunity. The second choice, hands down, is the Night Fae. All 3 of its soulbinds offer great synergy with our playstyle and damage. Soulbind placement gives us the freedom to grab potency conduits without it feeling bad. While the Covenant abilities aren't as attractive as Kyrian's right now, I feel if Night Fae stays the way it is, it will be the go-to Marksmanship Covenant for the sole reason of its synergy and power gain, especially for PvE as your conduits gain ranks in power. Does this leave the other 2 covenants out of the picture? No. I believe Necrolord and Venthyr definitely has its niche, but being that their soulbinds do not provide synergy with Marksmanship and their abilities being the sole reason to pick them, I feel that in time they will fall behind. With that being said, we cannot ignore Nagia for the Venthyr Covenant, with her haste proc and Dwarf Shadows becoming a CC. This will work in both PvP and PvE, but you might feel stuck to this one soulbind as the other 2 soulbinds do not grant you anything substantial unless you need a 10% Versa proc for you and your teammates or Theotar, or mitigate damage with General Draven. With Necrolord being the least attractive when it comes to soulbinds, their class ability, Death Chakram, has a lot of synergy with Marksmanship, as it gives focus while dealing damage, with its damage increasing every hit. Fleshcraft is also attractive, as it's a shield on demand with perks that may make you immune to CC or cast while on the move, but those 2 perks are the only perks worth mentioning from all of their soulbind abilities. Okay, so before we end the video, and for those who stayed this long, I want to remind you guys that soulbinds will not be fully unlocked once acquired, and will take a few weeks to fully unlock them. You also don't gain immediate access to all the soulbinds as they become unlocked while reaching certain quests in their respective Covenant campaign, and that takes a couple of weeks. During the first few weeks, as we unlock new soulbinds and new soulbind tiers, the meta will undoubtedly change when new soulbind abilities unlock and drastically change your power in some way. So there will be lots of different playstyles in the beginning, and as the weeks go by, we'll become more comfortable with the soulbinds and see which ones are the best against the meta of that time and for pure throughput. I mentioned this because in the first week I predict Kyrian being the strongest for its Covenant abilities, Venthyr for its throughput and CC chain, and Necro for its damage and damage mitigation. The extra 5% of Wild Spirits and the extra mobility from Soul Shape do not compare to the damage or utility that the other 3 Covenants provide at this stage of the expansion. When all the Soulbind tiers become unlocked, I predict that the Night Fae will hands down be the best Covenant choice for Marksmanship because of synergy and utility built in for all aspects of the game. Okay guys, this marks the end of the video. I hope you learned a thing or two. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like, and if you want to see more content, make sure to subscribe. If you want others to see this, then make sure to share the crap out of it. If you didn't like this video, give it a dislike and leave a comment with the reason why. And lastly, thank you guys for all the love and support we've been getting. I know I'm hella excited for Shadowlands, and with that being said, I'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace.